about our next session for many reasons, but one of which is I get to say hello to one of my favorite people and one of the most gifted moderators and users of the words anywhere, the great David Bloom. And at the same time, I have a chance to meet for the first time the also great Alan Wolk, co-founder and
Wolk.
analyst
He's a Wolk.
Thank you.
at
Volkswagen.
TVREV.
Yes.
How are you, sir? It's good to see you, Alan. You're always on the wrong coast for me, so it's delightful to be virtually in conversation in front of all these folks. I'm a little at loss in terms of expectation setting for how beginner we should get. I just heard Fred, always a smart conversationalist, and the guy from Gum Gum talking, and clearly we want to make sure we're not talking down to smart people, but I guess I would like to start just sort of your definition, as best one could put it, in what contextual targeting is and how it differs from past eras of media. So.
Sure. Yeah. So, in the early days of television, we targeted people based on their demographics. Nielsen was able to sort of figure out, who is what age, and that was basically, and male and female, and that was basically as deep as you could get. And even before Nielsen, they actually, we're going to get back to this, they actually sort of would look at the show and say, okay, we're pretty sure this is a type of show that appeals to moms, that appeals to, older men, whatever it is.
It was a gut thing, though. It sounds like in a lot of cases, right?
In the early days.
Just like the shows got made on gut. It's like, oh, we think this is going to be a good show. Oh, we think this is going to be a good show for these advertisers, right?
Exactly. So then we started getting those, that sort of Nielsen targeting, and it was pretty broad, but it worked for the industry. Then digital came along, and when TV went to streaming, and I'm going to make a plea to everyone now, and Mike Fisher, if you're listening, he's going to thank me too. Call it streaming. In 6 or 7 years, no one's been able to figure out the difference between OTT and CTV. I mean, yes, CTV is a subset of OTT, but it confuses the F out of people. So just call it streaming, and the little piece of it can be called mobile streaming that doesn't get watched on a TV. But anyway.
And I want to say that you're saying this, Alan, as the man who should be rightly credited with coming up with the term fast.
Oh, I am. It's in Wikipedia and everything. So
you are the progenitor of the term. So you are all about slicing and dicing in a very precise way. But OTT, streaming TV.X just doesn't sound as good for an organization. So we'll go with OTT.X and go.
Oh, yes, for this, yes. But
so
not in the CTV piece, but anyway, no, OTT.X is a great name. Anyway, what was I? Oh, so when the digital people started coming in, they had all of these targets, and they try to move it over to streaming. And the problem was that the data sets that they have, two big problems. One, they're not that good. They were based on, sort of loyalty card programs and other things like that nobody was really too sure of. That when a lot of companies like TruthSet would go in, they'd be like, yeah, most of this is it's out of date. These people don't exist. That's not their main email, whatever it is. And the second piece is something we call left-handed jugglers. So what's that? There's only two, right? On digital, there's really two players, Meta and Alphabet, Google and Facebook. And you go to them and say, hey, I want to reach left-handed jugglers. And they're like, yeah, great. We've got 50,000 of them. You go to the TV companies and you say, one of the publishers say, oh, I want to reach left-handed jugglers. And they're like, you know what? Neither of them are watching this weekend. Sorry. So there's not that big an audience. The sort of targeting you can't get that deep. And so a lot of times people are defaulting to geo-targeting, which is an easy thing to do. And they can sort of they can use IP address. That's changing. That's a whole other conversation. But so contextual, so people started saying, well, what if we did it based on that? What if we did it based on what was on the show? Or we'll go back to the 1950s and say, we think this is the kind of show that hits this audience. But more than think, we actually have data now to show that, like, these are the type of, this is the type of content that we want our brand to run against. We can really get pretty narrow in here. One of the problems was that TV metadata, which is what you would take this from, was pretty bad, which is an understatement. But basically, when they digitized all the TV shows, it really depended on who did it. And all too often, it was just like, Seinfeld, comedy, Seinfeld, funny show. And that was it. So there really wasn't a
Episode
whole lot.
1, season 23 or whatever, right?
And that was if you were lucky, David. And then there would be no consistency. I mean, anybody who deals with this knows this. There's no consistency. So it's like S1, E23, E23, season 1. So, and the computers don't realize, that's all the same thing.
Yeah, they're not smart enough to figure out how to clean up the metadata either. That was another issue. They were still dumb computers, though that sounds weird to say. So.
Yes. And so, but now there's AI, and we can, and AI can come in and it can look at what's on the TV and, what's on the show and categorize it in a whole world of ways.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's but like frame by frame, right? I mean, that's the thing. It gets down to frame by frame categorization, what's in the screen, what's not, what words are used, all that stuff, right?
100%. And emotion too, because that's the thing that sets TV apart from digital, right? Is that there's emotion in television. There's not emotion, on a website generally. But TV has, TV, it's funny, it's poignant, it's dramatic, scary, whatever it is, there's something in there. And you can tag that. And then you can really get it. No, they're ordering a pizza here. Hey, Domino's, this would be a good place for you to sort of run your ad. And you have companies like Iris TV, Curve, iBuy, all these different companies that are in there kind of, different levels trying to make this happen by providing contextual targeting. Iris has something called the Iris ID. It's a content tag that kind of goes along with the programming.
Is it like a fingerprint, sort of? I mean, like, what was it? There was a music company that out of the Bay Area that was very smart about the Pandora, the fingerprint of music. It was like, and it would have a different subsets, and it was humans classifying it instead of AI, but you would get very granular about, driving beat and singer-songwriter and, all the D, much more in depth. And so is that kind of what the Iris fingerprint, it's a fingerprint, right?
Yeah, in some ways, it goes along. It's a little bit more sophisticated in that it goes along with the content, and advertisers can sort of unlock it, without getting super technical on it. It's a way to sort of classify and categorize everything that's on TV in a way that makes it easy for advertisers to use it. At some point too, it could obviously be used, or something similar could be used for search and discovery, because that's another huge issue that the industry has.
I think that's the biggest. That's the biggest headache on the consumer facing, and then on the advertising facing, it's how do you match the right stuff with the right the most value, most target is where your value is, but getting that target homing in on that target is the hard part, right?
Right.
So
right.
These hope to do that. Right?
Exactly. Yes. And contextual also solves a whole world of hurt that's been hitting streaming. Biggest one is privacy, right? So one of the problems with all these data sets is that they rely on you knowing who the people are. And there's a lot of privacy concerns. My IP address, you're using my email. Did your wife give permission? Did your kid give permission? Like, who knows? And those are all big issues. But with contextual, you're basing the targeting on what's on the screen. So it doesn't really matter who gave permission or who's watching. All that matters is that you're hitting the right chord, the right emotion, and that's huge.
So just to because it's really kind of an inversion in some way. So because you're watching, and we know exactly what that is that you're watching, we don't need to know who you are. This is a little bit like what TikTok does. It's less about having this long tail of information, personal information, more than it is about the ways you signal intention to watch, and then therefore the advertiser, somebody's intending to watch this show because they have endless choice. They're intending to watch this show. So therefore, we want to reach the people that are intending to watch this show and provide ads to it.
Exactly, exactly. And there's some instances where it's super clear, right? So if you look at HGTV ever, and if you ever watch,
Not exactly their target demographic, we'll just say, okay.
okay, but if you watch one of their home shows, House Hunters or something like that, or the Property Brothers, and somebody like Lowe's or Scott's Lawn Care runs an ad, it almost seems like it's part of the show, right? They're like, they're fixing up the yard and look, here's like, lawn care products. So seems super obvious that, that's a really good fit. And that's
Right.
where it comes from. Now, obviously other genres, horror genres, like, you're not going to run knife ads, but, it's,
Yeah, Wooscoff isn't signing up for that. I mean, it's probably
yeah.
not going to happen anytime soon. But
Exactly. But there's obviously, you sort of know who the fans are of that type of genre, and what sort of things they might like. And you can even customize the ads to people who are watching a horror show, a sports show, whatever. So it really becomes about the ad fitting in with the content, which is a better experience overall as well. And it doesn't feel super creepy, like, this thing's followed you around the web, or they know things about you. It's just like, okay, if you're enjoying this type of show, you're probably going to enjoy this type of product as well. And that's just a huge plus in terms of making the ad experience less painful for people.
the funny
Um,
part about this, it's almost like we share a vibe, right? This advertiser and this show, particularly this episode of this show, we share a vibe. Um, when we talk about contextual advertising, I'm interested because you can get it down to ridiculously granular things of frame by frame. I mean, maybe there are parts of the show where one advertiser works, but they don't work so well in a different part of the show. Have we gotten to that point yet where it's that sophisticated, or is that like just overkill at this point?
No, I mean, maybe not in that frame by frame, but the easy example on that is news, right? So a lot of advertisers steer away from news because they don't want their ads running against murders or bombings or war or
Yeah,
whatever.
Delta doesn't want to be next to the plane crash, right?
Right. But much of what is on news shows is not, it's like, it's not negative. There's a lot of like happy, positive stuff,
Right.
grandma celebrates 100th birthday, or like, here's tips for, how to enjoy the beach vacation. And, and all this other sort of, stuff that's not death and destruction, that's on a news show, that would be perfect for a lot of advertisers, especially they do a lot of, the cable news, because they're on for so long. They do a lot of service pieces, how to cook a turkey
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving, all this kind of, and that's the sort of thing that'd be great for advertisers. And having contextual advertising allows that to happen. It allows brands to say, okay, I'm going to be on this news show on this piece that's sort of a positive, feel good piece.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the things the New York Times figured out, speaking of dying businesses that have actually found somebody who's doing very well. The New York Times figured out how to chop up all of what it does into cooking and the fitness thing and the game stuff and have little things that they can make money off of subscription, but also make money off of ads that are targeted to audiences that care about those subsets of what used to be the daily newspaper, right? So taking that over to electronic media, TV, there seems like there's a lot of opportunity to part out even the newscast, which is interesting. Sports obviously wide open. Now, one of the things that I found interesting in some of the previous conversation were two words, and I'd love you to talk about these a little bit. And I thought they were really sort of crucial to the ideas of how we have success in contextual targeting, which is intention and trust, right? So it seems like both of those are things that you have to figure out how you build that trust with your advertisers to know they can trust that this is going to be where it's going to be. But then also, what's your intention? Who are you trying to reach? How are you trying to reach them? And can you trust that that will be delivered? It feels like that's sort of at the heart of this whole business. if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, very much. I mean, again, because a lot of streaming TV is sold programmatically, so you're not buying specific shows. So something like something like the RSID, something like what Curve is doing is allowing people to sort of get that data so that when the programmatic buy is made, they can sort of it works correctly and it gets them the thing that they want to get and it gets them the audience that they want to get. In that, which is a little bit off to the side, but it's still interesting, you can actually start enabling shoppable TV off of that. That's sort of where they're looking, is like, what would be a good place to sort of, to give people the opportunity to buy something? What sorts of shows do people want, are people not annoyed to pause and buy something off of? And again, like it's
Right.
a cooking show, they might be like, yeah, this sauce looks good. Like,
No, knives. This is where the knives come in, right?
There you go.
Totally
Yes,
where the knives come
yes,
in.
I want to get those knives.
Yeah.
Whereas during a high profile original drama, no one wants to stop it. You just want to see what happens next. So, there's a lot in there too. And I think that has a, that's going to have a big effect on sort of the next sort of generation of advertising on TV, if you will.
Yeah, I want to pivot looking forward because this is a great segue. Shoppable TV has been the holy grail. So much American commerce and electronic platforms since Jennifer Aniston was 22 years old selling her sweater, right? I mean, this has been a conversation since at least like 97 or 98, at least. I was there, and though you're far younger than I think you were too. And we still really don't have anything beyond QVC and Home Shopping Network that's really works. And those are like little, very narrow little niches of, cable stuff. I mean, what's it going to take to get to shoppable TV? It sounds like part of it is right place, right time within a broader array of programming. But is this something that Netflix is going to be doing, for instance?
Possibly. And again, not on every show, but I think on certain shows. Funny enough, in 2011 or so, company I was working for, we had come up with this product. And it was vaporware at the time, but it's still a good idea if anybody wants to build it. Which was, you had a second screen app and it would detect what show you were watching, and every advertiser in that show the app would collect it so that after the show you could go in, and if you wanted to either learn more or buy something, you just clicked on the button and that was that. I think that we're at a point now, say Amazon has something. Amazon is the best position for this because they
Absolutely.
They already have your credit card and all that. So as do any of the subscription services for that matter. But Amazon knows,
well, they have the gigantic shopping and delivery networks for fulfillment, but then they have this little thing called Prime Video, which I heard is going to be big someday.
Yes.
And now is really going to be, they just turned everybody into an ad tier, right? So that's where that gets really interesting to me, because something like 80% of those 100 million households now are getting ads that you wouldn't need to do a whole lot to go to that next step, right? I saw Jennifer Aniston sweater, they ran Friends, I saw the sweater, I'm going to go buy the damn thing, or whatever it is, right? I mean, that's the link.
Yeah, no, it's a huge number of people. We figure it's somewhere between 50 to 80 million, people who suddenly are part of this ad-supported streaming ecosystem who weren't previously. Amazon has something even better. They have this technology called X-ray. If you've ever paused an Amazon show, what it was, for those of you who don't know it, what it was previously used for is you'd pause the show and it would show you all the actors in the scene, and you could click on them and learn more about them. And it was really useful. Sometimes you go, oh, who is that? I know her.
Yeah, it did drop you to IMDb, which they also own. And then you could go to Box Office Mojo, which they also own.
Right, but now they've been using that to sell things. They've done some tests where you hit pause, and not only do the actors show up, but like their sweaters or their shoes or whatever product that their knives. and boom, you can click and it's Amazon, so you don't even have to go further. Now there's other companies, this company iBuy is looking at stuff where they can sort of do a seamless, set something up for other people who aren't Amazon, and there's other people doing this, looking at this sort of thing. But it's a great, it's a great tool. Now again, I think it's going to be very genre dependent, that certain genres you will buy things, and it's, put it this way, in a football game, after someone scores a touchdown and they cut to a commercial, if you have the opportunity to buy the jersey of the guy who just scored the touchdown, that's an easy win.
That's a walkover, right?
Right. But
they've got the games and they've got the store. Just go, right?
Right.
So.
But chances are somebody watching, say, The Last of Us is not going to stop to buy anything, just, to buy Pablo Pascal's jacket because they want to see what happens next. It's a little bit too high stakes and sort of lean in, if you will, as to lean back.
Absolutely. Well, where does we've only got a couple minutes left. So talk about AI and how that shapes where contextual targeting goes, and any companies that you may think of that are doing interesting things that people should be aware of using some of these tools.
Yeah, I mean, I tagged, sort of mentioned Iris is a company called Curve, KERV, and they do some really cool stuff where they can go in, sort of on the almost that sort of that frame by frame thing, where they're figuring out what's the emotion that's happening here, and they can also identify. They also have some technology that lets you identify what the person is wearing, who makes the table in the scene and all that, so you can makes selling it easier.
That's computer vision being used in an AI context, right? A particular slice of AI that's less sexy but really important. So
yeah. And then there's other, and then say this, like I mentioned, iBuy is doing stuff where they can sort of set up the carts. They're basically the fulfillment arm of all this, where they can sort of set up the carts so that you sort of, you can sort of go from network to network, streaming service to streaming service, and it's, you have this ID sort of that goes with you. And there's other people who are sort of figuring out also the sort of the mental piece of it, like what sort of products are good with the I remember years ago 4C used to do stuff like this. They are now part of MediaOcean, but they were sort of looking into, and this is before AI, where it's like, okay, who buys running shoes? It's not always the obvious people. Like
right. There's some bank shots involved in some of this that you don't expect because there's some sort of psychographic affinity, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, that gets really interesting too, and there's always some wacky things that come out of that. I'm really interested to see what TV looks like, given that you are the progenitor of the term fast. This feels like something that the fast networks and channels should be jumping all over to drive revenue.
100%, because I mean that people go in knowing that there's ads, accepting that there's ads. They also have a lot of lean back content, right? They have a lot of they have a lot of well-loved reruns that people like watching because they know them and they like the characters, and they're happy, and that's even an easier sell sometimes if it's if it is Jennifer Aniston's sweater or something else, where you can add, it's a character that you like in a scene, it's easier to sell stuff off of that because it almost feels like it's an implicit endorsement. So
right, it's the vibe, and again, it's about a self-defining audience. If you cut these fast channels in a very specific way for a specific show or a specific genre or whatever, you're defining that audience, which makes it easier to be contextually targeted. So with that, Alan, it is delightful to see you. I will turn this back over to Jose and Mark and the gang and Eric, and let them head on through. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Eric.
Thanks so much.